Okay, our speaker, let me get our mic. You may or may not need this, Pastor. One of my most recent colleagues here in the New England Synod is Pastor Emmanuel Vasquez, and he is the somewhat newly called pastor, about a year and a half, at House of Prayer in Hingham, Mass, about, what, 15 miles that way? That way. Anyway, but, uh-oh, somebody just lost a blueberry. I thought it was a critter at first. Anyway, because critters bother me, especially in church. So, don't eat it, Anne. Okay, so anyway. One thing that I discovered about Pastor Emmanuel is that he's a poet, and he loves poetry, and he can do things like recite poetry from a memory, which always fascinates me. So he's going to, I'm going to let him do his thing here today. We do have some questions to ask him at the end. If you have, I've got some questions I want to ask. And we need to close those doors because it's very rattly out there. Pastor is from Puerto Rico, that great commonwealth to the south. I grew up in Florida, so I kind of understand, sort of, Puerto Rican culture. And he went to the University of Puerto Rico there, correct?
Yep.
His background is in English. Spanish, well, of course, but the study of Spanish language.
Yes.
Spanish language literature and poetry and things like that. And he's also, his theological training was in that small village to the north of us in Cambridge at the Harvard Divinity School. So we are very honored that he is here. And anyway, help me give him a big round of applause. And please tell us if you can't hear him. All right?
All right, can you all hear me?
Can you hear him?
Yes. Okay, good. All right, good. Well, thank you so much for the invitation, Pastor Jeff. And I do have to clarify, I don't consider myself a poet by any means. I am definitely a lover of poetry. I do think that poetry adds a lot to a human life. And I myself kind of dabble in what I call bad poetry, but that's kind of like poetry for myself. And it's going to be something that I'm going to explain right now regarding why I think the title that I put for this little lecture is what is poetry and why we should read it, memorize it, and write it. So what do y'all think poetry is? Let's see, rather this be a conversation rather than me kind of just talking.
When Irish eyes are smiling, that's a poem.
Yes, exactly.
It's a sung poem.
Exactly. Poetry can also be chanting, singing. It's all these aspects that carry with them certain characteristics like rhythm, musicality, like the play with words. It's because poetry is the delight in human experience expressed through words. So all the things that we're doing, even eating, sharing the table together, those are poetic matters. Those are things that can be expressed in poetry. So, because I'm a preacher, I sometimes like to say things in Greek. And so one of the meanings of the word poetry is poiesis, meaning to create, to make. So poetry is one of these kind of old artistic endeavors of human beings. It's one of the oldest. Predates writing, because everything was spoken. It was an oral tradition. And so you would pass along a certain rhythm or sort of saying, a wise saying, an aphorism. It was passed down from generation to generation. And people would memorize those things. That's why poetry sometimes repeats itself. It rhymes because it kind of keeps in our brains. It's kind of kept there for posterity. So one of the reasons why poetry is so important is because it kind of preserves the cultural memory of people. Like, for example, today we celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and we have all the Irish traditions and whatnot, and Ireland has a great poetic tradition. And so without that, it misses out on our cultural identity. And that's one of the reasons why I think sometimes in today's world we kind of miss out on memorizing poetry. because we had kind of lost connection to those things, to that diversity of cultural expressions that kind of make up who we are. And today, basically, this is going to be a little bit of a poetry reading. I want to share with you kind of a few poems I've selected that come from the Spanish-speaking world, and I'll be saying them in Spanish, so you can hear, first of all, the delight in those words in the original language of the Spanish language. You can see the rhythm, the kind of the tonality, and even if you don't understand Spanish, you can hear some of the cadences of the language. And also I'll give you an English translation of those poems. Before I do that, I also want to say that poetry can be like a spiritual practice too. It kind of focuses our attention. Because poetry normally is not like a novel, or it's not like prose in which you are kind of going deep into one subject, creating a whole drama or a whole cast of characters. Poetry kind of is brief, intense, looks at one particular thing and tries to deepen it. Because poetry sometimes it corresponds to that emotional affect. It kind of, you see, let's say, a beautiful landscape. You're captivated by that landscape. And so you try to put in words that kind of inexpressible feeling that resides in human spirit. So in spirituality, in spiritual practice, that's what we try to do. We try to pay attention, try to express the inexpressible. Even with this kind of faulty tool that we have called language, words, which can never get at the experience, but it tries to approximate to it. And that is the attempt of poetry, right? It kind of captures the mind of so many people. It is what people call the aesthetic elevation of human life. It's human life made beautiful by the use of our words. So there are feelings like love, for example, which need to be captured. It's one of the most famous kind of poetic subjects. It's like because love kind of takes us up, it makes us transcend from our own bodies, it kind of revolutionizes our mind, it kind of makes us obsessive. And one of my favorite love poems is in the English language actually, by Shakespeare. Let me not the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when the alteration finds, but bends with a remover to remove. Oh no, it is never fixed mark. It looks at tempest and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, or whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not kind and fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickles compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of day. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. And something like that, that you keep it, you have it memorized, and you can just, it's something that accompanies you.
Could you be that a little closer to the mic?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, a little slower too.
Yes.
Sorry, Pastor.
Yes, yes.
I'm very accustomed to this rhythm.
So let me not the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks at tempest and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickles compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. That's from Shakespeare, from the sonnets. Yes, you were saying something?
I said bravo.
Oh, thank you. Well, there's going to be more of this poetry reading, so you can continue to hear the inspired production of human beings regarding these experiences that we have. And so I've kind of made a little bit of a collection of poets corresponding to different themes, different feelings. I have Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint John of the Cross. These are two great Spanish poets. I'm going to basically read one of the greatest poems written in the Spanish language by Saint John of the Cross. And these are kind of spiritual poems, but they kind of correspond to feelings of anxiety and tranquility, feelings of spiritual dryness and then joy coming from that period of dryness. So the first one, from Saint Teresa of Avila, I'm going to read it in Spanish first and then in English. And it says something like this: Nada te turbe, nada te espante, todo se pasa. Dios no se muda, la paciencia todo la alcanza. Quien a Dios tiene, nada le falta, solo Dios basta. In English, let nothing trouble you, let nothing frighten you. Everything passes. God does not change. Patience overcomes everything. Whoever loves God lacks nothing. God alone is all we need. So this is, in English, it's often called St. Teresa's bookmark, because it was a prayer that she wrote found in one of her breviaries, one of her prayer books. And St. Teresa went through a lot in her life, a lot of illness. And she's kind of spent it, in all this kind of spiritual conversation with God. And she kind of underwent, that's why she's also known as the patron saint of headaches, basically. Like she had all these headaches, and so she kind of became an expert in handling headaches. So that experience of, especially in a time when there's a lot of anxiety, when there's like these feelings that things are not certain, the world kind of is topsy-turvy, it's not how it was. But we're reminded that there are things that are rooted, that are eternal, that do not change. Things like...
Can you read it again, please, in Spanish and in English?
All right. Well, it's a special petition for Pastor Jeff.
I need to hear it.
Nada te turbe, nada te espante, todo se pasa. Dios no se muda, la paciencia todo la alcanza. Quien a Dios tiene, nada le falta, solo Dios basta. And let nothing trouble you, let nothing frighten you. Everything passes, God does not change. Patience overcomes everything. Whoever loves God lacks nothing. God alone is all we need. So there is that sense of trusting God, trusting God's love that kind of keeps Saint Teresa from kind of all these things that the uncertainty of illness, the uncertainty of the things that were passing, because Saint Teresa lived in a time of a lot of reform within her religious order. So she was also involved in a lot of controversy over her writings, over the different reforms that were taking place. And so that trust kind of can keep a person together. So when I'm kind of like, I don't know, things are happening in the world that I myself kind of need a little bit of a breather, I kind of sing this little prayer poem. There's also a sung version, which I'm not much of a singer, so I can't sing it to you. This is kind of more of my private devotion. But this is kind of the function of poetry as well, is a song, a chant that carries us, accompanies us, kind of expresses those feelings that reside deep inside us. The next poem is from St. John of the Cross. It's called The Dark Night of the Soul. It's a very dramatic title. But St. John of the Cross wrote this while he was in prison, and also because of the reforms that were going on in his religious order. And in the middle of that dark night, as he would call it, of being in prison, and being kind of feeling of abandonment, feeling of dryness in prayer, there was a breakthrough moment, a breakthrough of joy amidst the darkness. So he wrote this beautiful poem, and this poem appears again and again in a lot of Spanish poetry. Some of these verses kind of crop up in poets of later generations. Entonces, en una noche oscura, en ansias, en amores inflamada, oh dichosa aventura salí sin ser notada, estando ya mi casa sosegada, a oscuras y segura por la secreta escala disfrazada, oh dichosa aventura, a oscuras y encelada, estando ya mi casa sosegada. En la noche dichosa, en secreto que nadie me veía, ni yo miraba cosas sin otra luz y guía, sino la que en el corazón ardía. Aquesta me guiaba más cierto que la luz del mediodía, a donde no esperaba, quien yo bien me sabía, en parte donde nadie parecía. Oh noche que guiaste, oh noche amable más que la alborada, oh noche que juntaste amado con amada, amada en amado transformada. En mi pecho florido que entero para él solo se guardaba, allí quedó dormido y yo le regalaba, y el ventalle de cedros aire daba. El aire de la almena cuando yo sus cabellos esparcía, con su mano serena en mi cuello guía, y todos mis sentidos suspendía. Quedéme y olvidéme, el rostro recliné sobre el amado, cesó todo y dejéme, dejando mi cuidado entre las azucenas olvidado. So the English is, in a dark night, with anxious love inflamed, O happy lot, forth unserved I went, my house being now at rest. In darkness and in safety, by the secret ladder disguised, O happy lot, in darkness and concealment, my house being now at rest. In that happy night, in secret, seen of none, seeing not myself, without other light or guide, save that which in my heart was burning. That light guided me, more surely than the noonday sun, to the place where he was waiting for me, whom I knew well, and where none appeared. O guiding night, O night more lovely than the dawn, O night that has united the lover with his beloved, and changed her into her love. On my flowery bosom, kept whole for him alone, there he reposed and slept, and I cherished him, and the waving of the cedars fanned him. As his hair floated in the breeze, that from the turret blew, he struck me on the neck with his gentle hand, and all sensation left me. I continued in oblivion lost. My head was resting on my love, lost to all things and myself, and amid the lilies forgotten, threw all my cares away. So that poem has a very striking feature. I don't know if you guys noticed it. What do you notice of this poem that is kind of a bit different from what we consider a religious poem? Let's see. Jeff?
It's very sensual.
It's very sensual, exactly. Over there.
It almost sounds like a Shakespeare wording because I can hear iambic pentameter.
Exactly. It has some could have some Shakespearean thematics too, like he wrote a lot about love, and St. John of the Cross is using a lot of what is often known as courtly love poetry. You know, poetry using secular themes, like these courtly love poems, and applying them to a spiritual counterpart, because for the poet, all the things that in our daily lives are love, eroticism, all these things are not absent from the relationship with God. They can actually be vehicles to express these spiritual experiences. So for St. John of the Cross, the way to describe this feeling of unity with God was as with a lover. And even though this was he was a monk, of course, all these things, but it is the language, the words that can convey that feeling. So he said, what words can convey what I'm feeling? And he used these wonderful poems, these wonderful descriptions. Often it was very controversial, even in his time when he wrote them. But there's like biblical kind of parallelisms here, because those poems are completely correspond to a book of the Bible called the Song of Songs. You all know what this book is. It is the love poetry between what's supposed to be King Solomon and his beloved. And so a lot of the imagery from that book, the Bible, is employed. Also, there's a lot of poetry by St. John. So you see that in a poem like this, in moments of darkness, there's also light. Even in moments of suffering, something good can come out of that suffering. That's also part of this experience that St. John is kind of trying to describe. This thing's kind of falling on me. I don't know if you guys are hearing me well. So the next poem actually corresponds to what we just ate. This one is from a Chilean poet. His name is Pablo Neruda. And he wrote a book called Elemental Odes. And this one is a book that caused a lot of controversy in the poetic world because they say, this guy's writing about an onion. You know, what is that for poetic, you know, what is their poetry in an onion? But once you hear what Pablo Neruda had to say, it's one of my favorite poems, because you could take something as basic as an onion and have this wonderful aesthetic experience. And I myself have it because, I don't know if y'all who cook here, y'all cook? Yes. Yes, well, you know, since I also like to cook from time to time, and one of my favorite things is dicing an onion. And for me, dicing an onion is, I don't know, there's some pleasure in that for me. Something about the skill of doing that, I don't know. And so it's also, onions are such a basic staple also in our cuisines, therefore. I love that there is a great poem written about such a lovely vegetable. So Pablo Neruda wrote this ode. It says, Oda la cebolla, ode to the onion. And it says, cebolla, luminosa redoma, pétalo a pétalo, se formó tu hermosura. Escamas de cristal te acrecentaron, y en el secreto de la tierra oscura se redondeó tu vientre de rocío. Bajo la tierra fue el milagro, y cuando apareció tu torpe tallo verde, y nacieron tus hojas como espadas en el huerto, la tierra acumuló su poderío, mostrando tu desnuda transparencia, y como en Afrodita el mal remoto, duplicó la magnolia levantando sus senos. La tierra así te hizo, cebolla, clara como un planeta y destinada a relucir, constelación constante, redonda rosa de agua sobre la mesa de los pobres gentes. Generosa deshaces tu globo de frescura en la consumación ferviente de la olla, y el tirón de cristal al calor encendido del aceite se transforma en rizada pluma de oro. También recordaré cómo fecunda tu influencia el amor de la ensalada, y parece que el cielo contribuye dándote fina forma de granizo, a celebrar tu claridad picada sobre los hemisferios de un tomate, pero al alcance de las manos del pueblo, regada con aceite, espolvoreada con un poco de sal, matas el hambre del jornalero en el duro camino. Estrella de los pobres, hada madrina envuelta en delicado papel, sales del suelo eterna, intacta, pura como semilla de astro, y al cortarte el cuchillo en la cocina, sube la única lágrima sin pena. Nos hiciste llorar sin afligirnos. Yo, cuanto existes, celebré cebolla, pero para mí eres más hermosa que un ave de plumas cegadoras. Eres para mis ojos globo celeste, copa de platino, baile inmóvil de anémona nevada, y vive la fragancia de la tierra en tu naturaleza cristalina. It is onion, luminous flask, your beauty formed petal by petal. Crystal scales expanded you, and in the secrecy of the dark earth, your belly grew round with dew. Under the earth, the miracle happened, and when your clumsy green stem appeared, and your leaves were born like swords in the garden, the earth heaped up her power, showing your naked transparency. And as the remote sea and lifting the breast of Aphrodite, duplicating the magnolia, so did the earth make you, onion, clear as a planet, and destined to shine, constant constellation, round rows of water upon the table of the poor. You make us cry without hurting us. I have praised everything that exists, but me, onion, you are more beautiful than a bird of dazzling feathers. Heavenly globe, platinum goblet, unmoving dance of the snowy anemone, and the fragrance of the earth lives in your crystalline nature.
Oh, pretty neat.
It's a wonderful ode to the onion.
Wow.
Over time.
We have one more poem and some questions.
Yes. So, I've got a few up here in my sleep, but I'll choose one of them. And I think one of the other feelings that correspond to poetic expression is the one for thirst for justice. Poetry is not separated from, let's say, the social aspects of our lives. Poetry is not something just residing here in the spirit. It also corresponds to things that are happening in the world. It includes that because that's part of our lives. And I don't know how much you know about Puerto Rican history or how much you know of the Puerto Rican experience. I feel like there's some similarity with the Irish experience as well. It's the experience of immigration, discrimination, forced migrations that happened, especially if you go to New York City. I see a lot of the Puerto Rican community there that have a lot of interactions with the Irish as well. And our national poet is called Juan Antonio Corretero. That's our national poet. And like many things in poetry, they get turned into song, into very popular music. And so this poem in particular called Boricua en la Luna, says Puerto Rican on the moon. That's basically what it means. Kind of corresponds to that history of what happened in the 1950s. Puerto Rico, of course, was booty of war from the war between the United States and Spain. And for many years, Puerto Rico was in extreme poverty, had an extreme kind of revitalization of its society. And so a lot of people were kind of moved out from the island into the States to work in farming and industry. And so Antonio Corretero tries to express that in this poem. It says, desde las ondas del mar, que son besos a sus orillas, una mujer de Aguadilla vino a Nueva York a cantar, pero no solo a llorar un largo llanto y morir. De ese llanto yo nací, como la lluvia una fiera y vivo la larga espera de cobrar lo que perdí, por un cielo que se hacía más feo, más volaba, a Nueva York se acercaba un peón de las Marías, con la esperanza decía de un largo día volver, pero antes me hizo nacer y de tanto trabajar se quedó sin regresar, reventó en un taller. De una lágrima soy hijo y soy hijo del sudor, y fue mi abuelo el amor único en mi regocijo, del recuerdo siempre fijo en aquel cristal de llanto, como quimera en el canto de un Puerto Rico de ensueño, y yo soy puertorriqueño sin nada, pero sin quebranto. Y el lechón que me desmienta que se ande muy derecho, no sea en lo más estrecho de un zaguán pague la afrenta, pues según alguien me cuenta, dicen que la luna es una, sea del mar o sea montuna, y así le grito al villano, yo sería borincano, aunque naciera en la luna. It says, from the waves of the sea that roll in kissing the shore, a woman from Aguadilla came to sing in New York, but she arrived only to cry, a river of tears, and died. I was born from that river, like a beast born from rain, and I lived a long wait to regain what I lost. Through a sky that grew uglier the longer he flew, toward New York, came a worker from Las Marias. His hope, he always said, was to someday return. But first he made me, then from overwork he died. Before he could return home, he collapsed on a factory floor. I am the son of tears and the son of sweat. It's my grandfather's love I remember best. It was the only joy I could see, through the pain of tears, like a chimera in a song of the Puerto Rican dream. And I am Puerto Rican. I am broke, but not broken. And that poser who denies me, let him walk a straight and narrow path. Let him beware of a row in the winding of an alley. Because someone once said, they say the moon is one thing, though it be mountain and sea. And as I defy the villain, I yell, I will be Boricua, even if I were born on the moon. So those are the poetic renditions that I've got for you today. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
The hard part of this is I could listen to Pastor Emmanuel talk for 2 or 3 hours. The beauty of the language, and I live in language and ideas, and I try to live in my heart as much as I can, even though we Lutherans live in our heads a lot. And a lot of theologians live in their heads, but we live in our hearts, and poetry definitely speaks to this part of my body as much as Shakespeare would, and David pointed this out. I heard a lot of Shakespeare and St. John of the Cross, who were somewhat contemporaries, 16th century contemporaries. And even though they never knew each other, but they both speak in the language of love, and somewhat erotic love, or certainly sensual love, and that kind of love towards God. And I'm trying not to preach now, but it certainly is very moving to hear someone just to read poetry to you. It's comforting and soothing and inspiring. Questions for Pastor Emmanuel? Anybody? Yes.
You like Federico Garcia Lorca?
Yeah, well, Federico Garcia Lorca is one of the best poets that we have.
You can go on and on forever with him.
Yeah, well, Federico,
Yeah, one.
not that I'm an expert in Federico Garcia Lorca, but he is one of the luminaries of Spanish poetry, especially 20th century Spanish poetry. Also a lot of theater as well. A lot of drama is also Federico Garcia Lorca. He perfected the romance, which is a poetic form that in Spanish language is used a lot. One of his most famous works, the Romancero Gitano. I don't know if I should say this word, the gypsy romance. Now that idea is kind of iffy now, but this is one of his great works. Yes.
Anybody else? What made you come to Massachusetts, Pastor?
I've been living here for, let's say, 7 years now. It's going 7 to 8. So the way I came here, basically, I don't like to say this term in particular, but it was as a climate refugee, let's put it that way. So I don't know if you remember in 2017, Hurricane Maria.
Oh, yes.
In Puerto Rico. So I was a student at the time. I was in my 4th year of college. And the university closed down for about a month and a half after the hurricane hit. So a lot of students nobody was studying at that time. Nobody was working, a lot of the institutions were closed. And so Brown University in Rhode Island had a special emergency program for students where they said, we'll take 25 students from the university for them to continue their academic degree. So I was told to apply, and they had a little application thing, and I said, sure, why not, let's see what happens. And they said, yeah, sure, come into this jet and we'll fly you over to Providence. And so that's where I was for a year. Then I got accepted to Harvard Divinity School, I applied, and everything went well, and I've been here ever since.
Okay, in interest of time, I've got a question, Janet.
Just a question, with the upheaval in our government, with the Department of Education, grants, everything, and none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow. Do you have a fear that things like poetry are going to get pushed somewhere else?
Sadly, yes. There is, I think somebody sent me a news article where I think the president, irrespective of opinions about him, he signed up for the Kennedy Center for, I think it's like a cultural institution in New York. He kind of was going to police, in a sense, whatever is being produced by that cultural center. And unfortunately, yes, these things, you know, poetry requires creative freedom to express whatever it is. So whenever there's like a limitation on that or imposition, oh, you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't express this reality with you, then yes, it will be impoverished. And poetry often is, you know, runs against the norm, and is always at the edge of orthodoxies. So that definitely might cause problems sometimes. Read or practice poetry. So same with novels, you know, banning books, all this kind of stuff is
Thank you so much. Let's give Pastor Emmanuel.